story I'm going to tell you about is about words and how we engage with them and what we can do with them and what words do to us. How we can manage words, engage with words to move on towards perhaps a better future, and how we can how we can allow words to overpower us and freeze us in time. And I'll start with the first statement that all of us, myself included, we have a strong faith in ourselves as independent, clearly thinking people. We all believe that the values we hold, our ideas on social and moral issues are clearly thought out and rational and our very own. I want to challenge this. I feel that the views we hold are not really our own, that most of them stem from what we hear around us. The idioms, the clichés, the gossip, the suni sunai baatein, the kisse kahaniyan that circulate through conversations, which are part of the world in which we live, and which are repeated, constantly repeated, so many times that consciously or unconsciously we absorb them and internalize them. And so when we think we are expressing our independent views, we are perhaps simply mouthing what has been said and said and said by others around us. And I'm going to illustrate what I'm saying by telling you two stories and what happened when the two stories met and led to a third story which is unfolding now. The story I'm going to tell you is the story of Aurat March and the slogans that aroused so much outrage, and the other story is the story of language use, of the clichés, the sayings, the muhavre that shape our minds, including the language of abuse, the gali galoch, the maa behan ki galiyan, which are part of our ambient air. And if you don't believe me, just ask yourselves, who uses the language of abuse? Who uses the gali galoch? The local gunda and badmash? Only? No. It is the common currency of men and of some women also, especially in the rural areas where middle class proprieties have a lesser hold, or among the younger, trendy elite, for whom it is an indicator of being part of the bold and beautiful circles. But to come back to the language of abuse, what does it do? It strips women of their humanity. The gali galoch, the maa behan ki galiyan, as you all know, are made up of explicit and graphic descriptions of what men will do to women's body parts. They fragment women. They dehumanize them. They reduce them to sex objects. Erase the rest of the person. But they are common currency. These gali galoch, this maa behan ki gali, is the language of male bonding. It's the language of the dirty joke. It's the language of laughter. It is also the language of anger. And it is around us all the time. When it comes together, when it joins up with the kisse kahaniyan, the muhavre like औरत कमाती है, औरत मेरी बीवी काम नहीं करती, मर्द कमाता है, औरत खाती है, मर्द औरत का मजाजी खुदा है. Or, as I was reading, and I'm not reading the other day, it is a text I've read again and again, it's a very popular text, which begins with, it is your responsibility to obey the man's least behest. If he asks you to stand all night with your hands folded, you must do so. If he says it is day when it is night, you too must call day night, or night day the other way around, because that is the only way that you can hold his trust. You must never lose his trust. Now, what is this message? Now, the interesting thing that happens here is that when we listen to all these, we at one level believe them. At another level, we know that they're not the entire truth, but we still go along with it. We know that boys cry. In fact, if boys didn't cry, it would make them very ill. And when they don't cry, it does make them very ill. Women work, unpaid work in the house, paid work in offices, in the fields, as cotton pickers, as the masis who come to our home. They keep the home fires burning. So many times they are supporting men who don't work. I'm not referring to the idle rich, but to the ordinary man who cannot get a job, or who is a junkie, or a drug addict, or has some other problems. Women are supporting them. But we do not acknowledge that. We do not recognize it. Even in our statistics, these things are not recognized. So come back to the question of who makes our opinions. Much are those the opinions we mouth ours? Which voice do I speak in? Is it my own voice? Or do I even have a voice that is my own? It's a question I want to ask. I'm asking myself and you. I'm not excluding myself from it because I am as much part of society as you are. To come to the story of Aurat March. The Aurat March slogans which caused the greatest outrage were Mera Jism, Meri Marzi. It was read by the majority of the public as a demand for unbridled sexual freedom. Understandable, given what is this reading coming out of, the clichés, the gali-galoch, which sees the woman only as a sex object, which erases her identity. So wo fir kya karegi? If her jism is all that it is, then when she talks about the jism, she is talking about the same activity that is committed on it by force and through violence. Not always, but that is the mainstream. And so the slogan is misread, when actually the slogan Mera Jism Meri Marzi was a demand for bodily integrity, for the prevention of rape, for the prevention of underage marriage, for the prevention of child abuse. Similarly, when we go to the next offensive slogan, and there were many of its kind, Apni dick pics apne paas rakho. Now, again, these horrible women reacted in the wrong way, and so they were misread. They deserve to be misread. Because instead of going into a state of shock and awe at the thought of a dick pic, they rejected it. They protested it. They said, we don't want it. It was a protest against sexual harassment. But again, it was read as an act of shamelessness on their part for daring to talk about dick pics. औरत का जिस्म या मर्द का dick pic, वो मर्द बोल सकता है उसके बारे में. Women cannot talk about these things, they're taboo. And that is where the transgression came, that is where the misunderstanding came, the misreading came, the anger came, the outrage came, the haya marches that came in response to that. So that is one story. The other story again is the story of the language of everyday use, which is reinforcing the other narrative of male dominance, of female subordination, of women as objects for the sexual, to give sexual pleasure to men, to have none for themselves, to be passively, quietly acquiescent to acts of violence or to acts of love even. They have no agency in that. It is what caused the anger, what caused the outrage, was the fact that the slogans and the fact of Aurat March, Aurat to achhi aurat to ghar pe rehti hai na, there were all these not so achhi aurats out in the streets, full of energy, full of bounce, laughing, making fun of men, transgressing boundaries, violating the sanctities of male importance. So that is where the tension came. That is where the anger came. And that is where the misunderstandings and the misreadings came also. And that is why those slogans were misread, misunderstood, condemned, not just by the religious right or the Maulanas or the extremists, but by the liberals and the progressives and the educated and the so on and so forth, who are otherwise sympathetic to the women's cause. What could not be understood was the fact that the woman, the silent woman of our imaginings, of cultural imagining, the acquiescent woman of of male dreams, the insentient jism of their ownership had a voice, was speaking out, and not only speaking out, but saying all the wrong things, challenging the existing established authority thresholds. And that is where the tension came. So these are the two stories, the story of the Aurat March and the story of the language of daily use and the gali galoch that are part of the ambient air, what we breathe in, what we hear all the time, which are constantly reinforcing received ideas, and led to the building of a third story, which is unfolding now, which is again, on the one hand, a story of resistance and protest, and on the other, of intensified attacks, of the filing of criminal charges against women for speaking out, and accusations of blasphemy, and doctored images to make those false accusations. And it's an exciting time to live in. It's also a scary time to live in, but it is a time of hope because the stranglehold of established ideas is being challenged. There is new energy there, and it is not just women, it is young men also who are coming out. And what I want to say to you, I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'm not asking you how to think. But what I do want to say to you is that language is a gift. It enables us to formulate ideas, to imagine worlds, to think through things, to envision worlds which are more desirable, more equitable, more fair, more beautiful than the ones in which we live. And it is our choice. Again, our choice, without coercion, to decide how we want to use it, how we want to engage with that language. Do we want to play it safe? And there is safety in familiar circles and familiarity. To stay with the mainstream discourse, to stay with the clichés, the kahavats, the muhavre, the quotation from Maulana Ashraf Ali Thanvi's Bahishti Zevar, which I just referred to, or to step forward, to step into the unknown. I'm not saying is unknown mein aap aaye ya us mein aaye, that is for you to decide. But it is all out there, and it is for us to engage with. And you are young, most of you, from what I can see. I mean, I can't see very much because of the light in my eyes. And the world is before you. There's a lovely quotation, I wish I could remember it at the moment. But, well, never mind. but the world is still there, and the world is full of excitement. The world is full of possibility. And the words and the language, the idioms, the imagery, the phrases with which we can shape it are there for us to move forward, to change. Or, as I said earlier, if we don't want to, then we can stay with the language that exists, with the dominant discourse, and let the clichés and the stereotypes freeze us in time, and nothing changes. But the world goes on, time moves. So the choice is yours. Thank you.